Here we go. And welcome. Thank you for joining us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And of course, you know that this is our Torah Temimah day. That we're going to be taking a look at Torah Temimah, and we actually got through the first parsha, and we're into the parsha of Noah. And at this point, Noah, this flood is about to start. He is in the ark. He's gotten all the animals with him, and we got some details about the ark itself. And now we go. All right. Bishnat shesh me'ot shana l'chayei Noach, in the 600th year of the life of Noah, and he was 600 years old.
Hmm.
Sorry? Did you want to?
I
Okay.
say that's amazing. 600 years.
Well, that's the whole other issue, okay? And again, I think if we understand this more as literature and don't get all hung up about, do people really live? Well, for the sake of our story, they do, and maybe they did. We just don't know everything. And of course, we know that one of the things that reduces the life of people is the level of impurity, whether it's impurity in the food we eat or whether it's impurity in the air that we breathe. These are the things that tend to destroy our lives.
Oh.
And so, who knows? Back then, there weren't a lot of people around. There weren't factories, pushing noxious fumes into the atmosphere. There weren't automobiles, you know.
It was an agriculture.
Yeah. At that point, it was, and who knows? I think also, the impurities of behavior that also reduce one's life. You act in
Uh-huh.
pure ways, that's going to also affect your longevity and the way your body operates. Where there are a lot of things we don't understand. So
Hmm.
there's also an argument, by the way, I want you to know, they're authorities, and I think they are authorities, who say that the people who had such long lives essentially were just those people mentioned specifically, that other people didn't live such long lives. But regardless, I don't want to get all hung up about that, other than whatever it's telling me in terms of trying to purify my life and to act in a pure way and not to do things that tend to be foul and besmirch and break my heart and cause pain to others and things like that. They are all things that I think, are not conducive, whether it affects the number of years you live or it affects the quality of life you have. I think, you want both. You don't just want years, you also want quality of life. And I think sometimes people mistakenly think what will give them quality of life, and they're mistaken about it. And the truth is, the greatest things are those spiritual things, those things that deepen our awareness and our appreciation of the miracle that life surrounds us with. So, you know, what
Hmm.
for whatever it's worth, for whatever it's worth. At any rate, he was 600 years old on the dot, okay? Whether it was his birthday, I don't know, but he was 600 years old. And בחודש השני, in the second month, ב-17 יום לחודש, on the 17th day of the month, ביום הזה, on this day, נפקעו, broken open, כל מעיינות תהום רבה, all the wells of the deep were broken open, of the great deep תהום רבה, ארובות השמיים, and the windows of heaven, נפתחו, were open. And please excuse me for 1 second. I had to clear my throat, so and you didn't need to hear that. All right. So the second month, it doesn't give you a month, doesn't give you the name of a month, but so what second month are we talking about? Obviously, if it's a second month, there must have been a first month, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten to second. So what is it? Tanya, an early source, right? Source prior to the year 200. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Oto hayom, that day, Yud Zayin b'mar Cheshvan haya. It was the 17th day of Cheshvan. So Cheshvan is the month that follows Tishrei. Tishrei is the first of Tishrei is what we call Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah. And according to many opinions, Rosh Hashanah was the day in which Adam, to make it a little clearer, that Adam was created. That was the date of Adam's birthday. People talk about the birthday of the world, but the universe was created before that point, and we note that Adam occurred, he was created on the first of Tishrei. Tishrei, we know, occurs around about September, early September sometimes into October. That's the beginning of the rainy season in the Mediterranean area. But regardless, and this all connected with what we're going to see, Umay בחודש השני. And so what do we mean on the second month? Why does it make it the second? Sheni ladin, right? The second of the judgment. So there's some beautiful connections, right? First of all, rainfall is so important, especially in Mediterranean climates where it is limited. Essentially, rain only falls in the wintertime in Mediterranean climates. The summers are dry, and if you don't get enough rain in winter, you're out of luck. And so the idea of rainfall being a sign of divine judgment, because rain comes from the heavens, it is considered such an amazing blessing. I can tell you that the first time I ever experienced the Mediterranean climate was when I came to California. The California coastal area enjoys a Mediterranean climate. And when I heard rain falling in California, it was like music. I'd never, ever heard rain like that before. It is so necessary and so important. And so the judgment takes place in that month of Tishrei, whether or not there will be adequate rainfall. And that's why Tishrei, that first month in September, is seen as a time of judgment. There are other interesting connections too. The constellation, right? The constellation of Tishrei is Libra, the scales. And of course, we know that scales are associated, it's a metaphor for judgment. And so there's some deep, deep connections with this. So there's a connection now being made that it was happening in the second month, and presumably the first month was used for God to fully take into account all the evidence that God had in terms of the judgment to destroy humanity at that particular point, except, of course, for Noah and his family. So let's take a look here at what Torah Temimah has to say, right? We're actually here. We are here. Ki lo yitachen lefaresh chodesh hasheni lecheshbon hashana. Because he says you can't explain the second month, and exactly what he means here, I am not certain. It's possible that he means according to the calculation of the year. We know that the Jewish year, right, the first month isn't Tishrei. The first month is Nisan, which happens in the spring. So that generally speaking, in other places where the Torah talks about the first month or the seventh month or the second month, it all is talking from the month of Nisan. Exodus chapter 12, verse 2 is the one that states explicitly that Nisan is to be the first month of the counting of months in the Jewish year. So I think, in fact, what Torah Temimah is saying here is that we can't say here that the second month, even though it says second month, is the normal quote, quote, second month. That is the month of, so Nisan, ER, so it would be ER, the month of ER. And we need to say we have to go on, of course, as to why. So he says, Yan, because. Chodashim minisan meninan knoda. And this is just explaining what he means, meaning that we can't count it the normal way because we all know that the year begins with the month of Nisan. Chodesh Cheshvan HaChodesh Hashmini, and that according to that calculation, if we have Nisan as the first month of the year, it would be the eighth month. V'lachein pirei sheni ladin, and for this reason, he explains that it's sheni ladin, that it is the second month to the month of judgment, right? Second of the judgment. Upiresh Rashi, excuse me, and Rashi explains, Shenigzera alehem gzeira betishrei shelefanav, and Rashi explains that the edict to destroy the world took place in the month of Tishrei that preceded Cheshvan. Ad kan leshono, end of quoting Rashi. Ulalei pirusho, and were it not for the way he explains it, if Shar Lefaresh, one could explain here, Sheni lechodesh hadin, very simply, that when it says Sheni lechodesh hadin, that it is the second to the month of judgment, Hainu Tishrei, which is Tishrei. Tishrei is the month of judgment. So Rabbi Eliezer has this tradition that we are not talking. This is in terms of Rabbi Eliezer's proof, right? That he theorizes, I would say, right, that the flood actually took place in Cheshvan. It makes sense. There's some evidence, there's supporting evidence in terms of that. My suspicion is that Rabbi Eliezer isn't speculating. He has a tradition, but there's actually support for that tradition, that's when the flood began. So, going back. Arubat Hashamayim. This is a beautiful, beautiful comment here. The windows of heaven. Again, notice, please, how we are looking at the details. It's almost like detective work, where what you do is you look for things that one might not pay attention to, but in fact turn out to provide important information. And here we go. So, why does the Torah use the term windows? Right? You could just say the heavens opened. You don't say the windows of heaven. Why using that particular metaphor? Kan arubot. Here it says windows arubot. Ulahalan, but later on in the Bible, Psalm 78:23, verse 23, it says, Vayitzav shchakim mima'al, he commanded the heavens above, v'daltei shamayim patach, and he opened the doors of heaven. Well, look at that. Why doesn't it say the windows of heaven? Here it says windows. There it says doors. What's bigger, a door or a window? Well, generally speaking, we think of doors as being far greater or larger, certainly, than windows. Of course, unless they're French windows, but that's a different story. French windows also operate as doors. Okay. So what's the point? Lamedcha, to teach you, Shemidah Tova, that the quality of goodness, that God's bestowing goodness, Meruba, is much greater, Mimidat Puraniot, from the quality of adversity. That the amount of adversity that God sends our way is much smaller than the amount of blessing that God sends our way, which I think is personal consideration. Pretty beautiful, beautiful takeaway from the knowledge, that knowledge of knowing that later on it says doors and comparing it to what it says here, where it says windows. Going into here. Okay. Let's find it here. For Ian Od, he says, look further. There's more to be said about this. Of course it is. I mean, it's a serious consideration, right? How do we look at life? Do we choose to see our relationship to our divine creator, to this transcendent, existent one, how do we look at it? Do we deeply sense the blessings that come our way as opposed to the adversity? And do we choose to see life in that way? Because if we do, well, number one, appreciation. We can learn how to be appreciative. And truly, 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 appreciation is the secret. It's the key to spirituality. And I would say to joy, to happiness. So if we don't, it's going to be a lot harder. So he says, look further, this idea, uve Tosafot, he's saying in the Tosafot commentary, Sota, in the tractate of Sota, Yud Aleph Aleph, page 11a, Ulefanenu, and ahead of us, we'll come to it, the Parshat Yitro. In the Parsha of Yitro, we know that Yitro is the one in which the Ten Commandments are to be found. And in one of those Ten Commandments, it in fact talks about how God gives, extends mercy to the thousandth generation. And I'm going to guess that that's where this is taken further. The pasuk, here we go, in that verse, V'oseh chesed la'alafim, and who shows mercy, deals out mercy, performs mercy, la'alafim, to the thousandth generation. Right? There's another example of how the quality of mercy, kindness, exceeds it. Chesed, kindness. So let's take a look where we are here now. All right. Vayhi hageshem al arts. Rain fell on the earth. Arba'im yom. 40 days. The Arba'im laila and 40 nights. And our next Torah Temimah is going to be the following verse. Be'etzem hayom hazeh, in the midst of this very day, ba Noach, Noah, v'Shem, v'Cham, v'Yefet, b'nei Noach, Shem, Ham, and Yefet, the sons of Noah, v'Eshet Noach, and Noah's wife, v'Shloshet Neshei Vanav, and the three wives of his sons, Itam, with them, El HaTeva, into the ark. That's when they came. When this day started on this day, 17th of Cheshvan. That's when they came in. So let's take a look. Be'etzem hayom, in the midst of the day. Well, again, we're being detective. Why does it have to say in the very middle of this day, right? In the very essence of this day. In other words, broad daylight, we're saying. Broad daylight is when, why that detail? Why that detail? Lama be'etzem hayom. Why does it say in the middle of the day, in broad daylight? Why? Lefi shayu bnei doro omrim, because the people of his generation were thinking, Ein anu menichino to likanes lateva. We are not going to allow him. We're not going to let him enter the ark. Anu notlim kshilim kardomot, and we are going to take pickaxes and hatchets, umavakim etateva. We are going to chop up, we're going to destroy the ark. Right? We're going to split up the ark. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, thought, right? Man proposes, God disposes. Hooray, in fact, I'm going to have him go into the ark in the middle of the day, right in front of all of them. And anyone who is capable of preventing him, let him come and let him try to prevent Noah from going in. So, again, man proposes, God disposes. There's some interesting thoughts here, right? There is this dynamic to this very day, we see it, that really resents the idea of a transcendent creator, right? That isn't physical, that isn't observable, that isn't subject to the rules of the empirical world. And they not only don't believe it, They actually resent it. They actually push away from it. And this is, of course, representing that kind of attitude. And one of the biggest takeaways, I think, is that we seem to feel that it's certainly within modernity, where we've made so many technological advances and advances in science, etc., that we think of people back then as being unsophisticated and, scared and ignorant and stuff like that. No, they were back then, you know. If you don't want to believe in a transcendent deity, if you don't feel any need to do that, I guess you don't. And it isn't dependent on too many external things, right? It depends on where your heart is and whether or not exactly you feel that you want to feel that some significance in finding a way to synchronize your life with service and in serving something far greater than yourself, and that's where you find significance. So, Ien Mashikatuv, check out what is written. We're not going to be doing it now, but hopefully eventually we will get to it. See what is written, Lakaman, below, Besof Perech Lech. So it's not too much more to go at the end of Lech Lecha, which is the parsha that follows this parsha of Noah, the pasuk, and in the verse, and again they're using the etzem hayom hazeh, right? The etzem hayom. In the middle of this day, Nimol Abraham was circumcised. That's at the very end of the parsha, where it talks about Abraham's circumcision, and that he did it in the midst of the day, in broad daylight. He wasn't ashamed. And the point, of course, is that he did this in as public a fashion so that people could see what was going on and could understand what was going on. It wasn't done in secret. And that, too, is something that is significant, but we'll see that significance later on. And with this, I am going to close this morning's lesson, except for any comments that you might want to make at this point. So, God willing, we will take a look at this at another time. So, stop the share.
So there's two calendars for the month. The one in April and the one in when we have the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Correct.
So which one do we go by on the Jewish calendar?
The Jewish calendar goes by the one that starts with Pesach. Here's the point.
Nisan?
Nisan, correct, is the first month of the year. The first month of the year. It's not the year turnaround. The year changes at Tishrei, on the first of Tishrei. And it's no different. We have an academic calendar that starts in September, right? We have various calendars which change, and so we're saying the cycle of months starts in Nisan, the cycle of years starts in Tishrei. That's all. That's all it means. The reason why the Jewish calendar starts in Nisan is because it represents a beginning, a very great beginning, and that is the beginning of the Jewish people as a nation. They were no longer a family, Jacob and his children and family, his offspring. They now became a nation. And because the birth of the nation took place in Nisan, we celebrate that moment, we commemorate that moment in Nisan by starting our year, the process in Nisan.
I think Jacob went to Egypt with 70 people.
Right.
And then they became a nation in Egypt.
Correct. Yes. They became so numerous, they became now a nation. So, yes. And now needed a Torah, laws and a land and everything like that. Yes, indeed. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording, and I hope you enjoyed this morning's session.
Yeah.